Hey, it's Dan here. Today I'm covering a subcategory of sidechaining called pre-compression. For detailed info on sidechaining and compression basics, please check out these other videos on my channel. The application of standard or other forms of compression can sometimes let us down, so a specialist technique needs to be employed. Pre-compression has evolved out of the competing needs of retaining transients, keeping audio relatively free of the artifacts of compression, and wanting a much less dynamic performance so it's easier to balance in the mix. You may struggle to find the right compromise between these competing needs. However, this isn't the case with pre-compression. It has the ability to tick all the boxes when it comes to transparent compression, all the while only using a single compressor. It's natural sounding, less dynamic, it retains transients, is more balanced overall, and has minimal artifacts, i.e. muffled, dark sounding, distorted, sibilant, or breathy. And best of all, this can be applied after the original recording has been made. Pre-compression is best described as look-ahead compression in that it sees the audio before it reaches the compressor and allows it to anticipate the peaks. Couple this with some makeup gain and you also bring out the softer moments of the performance too. The result is a balanced and more natural sounding style of compression. Here is a setup. When setting up the compressor, think about what it is you're compressing, as our basic knowledge of compression still applies here. You want to get it roughly in the ballpark of where you might normally compress something. This example I'm using is a vocal recording and a very dynamic one, as you can see. Let's have a quick listen.
In the words of my father, go on, save yourself, 'cause it's coming down. Yes, this whole thing's crashing down over my silent night. Grey dawn breaking over the ones I love.
For the moment, set your attack as slow as it will go. This is set at 300 milliseconds. Set your threshold controls to grab most of the audio signal, that is, the quieter parts you want to bring up. And set a ratio according to your needs. In this case, I'm using a 3:1 ratio. I'm using a soft knee in this case. Feel free to adjust the knee setting to your liking. Add enough makeup gain to bring the signal up to a decent volume. Now, all of these can be tweaked later, but for the moment it's really important that the release time is set correctly to avoid pumping. Take a listen to the audio, ignoring the peaks for now, and set your release time. Watch the meter and take note of how it bounces back on release. In this particular example, I determined that 300 milliseconds release was about right. Once you are satisfied with the release time, activate the sidechain key and feed your nominated bus into the compressor input, in this case, bus 1. Take the audio you want to compress and duplicate it onto a spare track. After that, feed the duplicate directly into the sidechain input via the bus you selected earlier. Now advance the duplicate track using the nudge keys in minutes and seconds grid mode by the same amount as the compressor's attack setting, in this case 300 milliseconds. This is a critical point for this technique to work. Note, you cannot move the track backwards unless there is a clear space at the beginning of the session. If this is the case, either trim the beginning of the regions or move the entire session forward to allow some room for this. Now that the compressor is reacting to the earlier version of the same audio, that is our advanced or look-ahead signal, the release time will be more audible when the compressor releases its grip on the audio partway through the end of a musical phrase instead of as it finishes. We need to account for this by adding at the very least the same amount of time to the release as we have advanced our duplicate track. In this case, we've moved it back in time by 300 milliseconds, and so we must add this onto the release time we originally determined as the appropriate length. This will help avoid any pumping or breathing issues that result from a release time that is too short. Use this as a minimum starting point, but make this longer if necessary. Below are examples of the vocal with different applications of compression. All examples have the same ratio, threshold, and knee settings, and I've used the maximum amount of makeup gain for each track before clipping occurred. The slow attack and faster attack tracks are compressed using standard compression, whereas the pre-compression track utilizes the look-ahead duplicate track through the sidechain of the compressor, as I have already explained. The slow attack track has an attack setting of 300 milliseconds, and the same goes for the release time, and a maximum makeup gain of 7.8. The faster attack track had an attack setting of 10 milliseconds and a 300 millisecond release time, and a maximum makeup gain of 17.6. The pre-compression track had an attack of 300 milliseconds and a release of 1 second. In this case, I felt that it needed to be longer than 600 milliseconds. We ended up with a maximum makeup gain of 14. Just by simply eyeballing these recordings, you will notice a difference between the examples when comparing to the original recording above. The slow track has large transient peaks at the front of the louder sections due to the added makeup gain before the compressor has belatedly kicked in and squashed the track.
And I've seen them run, yes, I've seen those flightless birds over my silent night.
If this was happening in a mixed context, you may be tempted to shorten the attack, enabling you to squash the peaks and boost the signal more, which is exactly what I have done on the faster attack track. Whilst we may have been able to boost the volume of this by using 9.8 decibels more of makeup gain, my feeling is that it has also brought up more problems for us to fix. For example, the breaths and sibilance, especially the S and F sounds, which are more apparent, and tonally it has become a bit more boxy and unnatural sounding.
Of this I've often heard, and I've seen them run, yes, I've seen those flightless birds.
Visually, it looks very different from the original uncompressed track, and whilst this may be stylistically appropriate for a hard rock vocal, it's unlikely to make sense in the context of a jazz or folk song, for example. We'll hear the differences shortly, but lastly we have the pre-compression track, which does resemble the contours of the original. It has brought up the quieter passages without the noise floor, as is the case with the faster attack example, and is a smoother, less obviously compressed sound. Let's listen to how each example sounds using just our ears.
Of this I've often heard, and I've seen them run, yes, I've seen those flightless birds. Of this I've often heard, and I've seen them run, yes, I've seen those flightless birds. Of this I've often heard, and I've seen them run, yes, I've seen those flightless birds. Of this I've often heard, and I've seen them run, yes, I've seen those flightless birds.
Primarily, I use this technique to level out unruly vocals before I then apply some lighter compression, but it can be applied to other circumstances too, such as leveling out any dynamic performances, sidechaining music for voiceovers, brick wall limiting, and de-essing a vocal, intuitive ducking of high frequency S's, to name a few. If you're looking to experiment further, I'd start messing with the relationship between the attack and ratio controls. Be sure to adapt release times and time advances on the look-ahead track to the new attack settings. You may discover, like I did, similar amounts of gain reduction occurring for fast attack, low ratio combos as there are for slow attack, high ratio combos. See what setting works best for you. At the end of the day, what works for the song is going to be the right setting. I hope you find this technique useful for getting a dynamic instrument to level out and sit better without the nasty side effects of heavy compression and faster attack settings. Before we wrap up, I'm going to say that this is the last tutorial of the series I'm going to do on compression. We were going to cover multiband compression, but I feel that there's plenty of information on that already floating around the internet. And so that's it for the series. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for further tutorials, please email me at yamahadrums2009@hotmail.com, and please subscribe to remain informed of future video releases. Until next time, happy mixing.